Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Sour and SaaS. I'm very excited to be here. I have Isabelle Papoulias with me. And how'd I do? Was I okay?
You did well. You did not butcher my last name. Thank you.
Yes, I did it. I'm like 25 episodes in of going, oh crap, I didn't ask how to say their last name. And I remember today, so it's a big moment for me.
Nice job.
I want to start off with the question. When I look at your resume, you started as sales director at Mediafly. How the heck do you go from sales director to CMO, and what's the value of sales experience in your mind as a marketer?
Yeah. So how the heck do you go from one to the other? You go overnight, literally. It's the way we do things here at Mediafly. We move fast. Yeah. There was a commitment to kickstart marketing, and there was, just for transparency, they had hired someone. That person left very quickly, and they didn't want to lose the momentum in marketing. So they asked me to step in, given my background from the agency side, and so I said yes, tentatively, asking for it to be temporary because I really liked sales. Yeah. And long story short, clearly became permanent because here I am. So I became VP of marketing eventually, and then after that CMO. So I'm a first-time CMO. It's been 2.5 years in the CMO role. And then the value of sales, heck, it's huge. It's just huge. I wish I had been in sales longer. In some ways, obviously, I was, account management on the agency side. You're always selling, right? Because look, marketing is leading more and more into sales, right? We're going deeper and deeper into the funnel and the sales motion, no question. So it makes the job easier, or harder.
So you're a certified killer, and I can tell. So how do you balance that personality and that ambition and that much growth internally with then also having to lead the team around you, because you grew so fast, right? Like I can imagine, right? I'm in the marketing org. There's a sales director hotshot, and next thing you know, she's my boss. How did you blend that when you're as driven as you are and has been as successful as you've been? Because obviously they give you responsibility, and then you create leverage off of that responsibility, and so they keep giving you more. But then how do you balance that with internal promotion and like working with others at the same time?
So you mean working with other peers or working with my team and building
with your team and others, because you were on the sales side, right? And then you're now the marketing person, and then it's like, okay, we have the salesperson leading us. Do they really get what we do? And then next thing you know, you've risen. How did you kind of bring the team with you?
Right. And so, you have to build trust, and trust comes with time. You have to show results. It doesn't happen overnight. And, I'm sure too, the internal clients are tougher than external clients sometimes, or all the time, I should say.
100% of the time, yeah.
And so, it's the quick wins. First of all, it's identifying the quick wins, right? And then you start to get positive feedback. Oh, I like the website, and you did this, or that's a great campaign. I love what you're doing on LinkedIn. It can be very tactical, right? And then eventually you start to show pipeline, and people are starting to pay more attention. Like, oh, you give me good leads. Oh, okay. Now we're talking. And then you continue to build. And then at some point, I think you get permission to start working on the brand, which is a whole other conversation. And as far as the team, leading the team and building the team, because there was no team when I started. My predecessor had literally just hired 4 people, and they had just arrived, and then he left, right? So, and then growing that team, and that's, for me, it's staying very close. And I don't mean close in managing them, micromanaging them, but staying close in terms of the one-on-ones and the more formal quarterly check-ins. And
what does a one-on-one cadence look like for you?
What?
Weekly, bi-weekly? Are you weekly or bi-weekly on those one-on-ones?
So I'm bi-weekly.
Okay, bi-weekly.
With my direct reports, and then I do check-ins every couple of months with the rest of the team, right down to the most junior person. And then every quarter we do formalized one-on-ones with everybody, and I'm a part of those. And the reason why those are important for me is because we really check ourselves in terms of career development and also what I call work satisfaction. Like I actually have a chart, and we rank work satisfaction on different levels, and it allows me to really look for the red flags, right? If work satisfaction is going down quarter over quarter for a certain person, then we talk about why that is and how can I help, etc. Career growth, same thing, right? If I understand their aspirations, then I can support and create their dream job, over time. And so that goes a long way towards retention.
I love that. So I have kind of some follow-ups on that. It sounds like culture, obviously, you're a big believer of, investing in the culture and turning it into a process, right? And then from that process, generating a greater output when it comes to performance. Does it actually work that way?
Yes, I think so. Absolutely. And because also the longer people stay, the better they get. Usually, right? They go deeper into their role and they grow. And I think you can see quickly, I mean, look, sometimes it hasn't been the right fit. And the way I like to handle that usually is I be direct on this. I don't like to fire people. I think when people don't work out, it's not because they don't smart, it's because they're not in the right situation. And so you have a conversation and usually it's mutual. By the time you have this conversation, you have it again, you start to plant the seed. I'm not really sure. Is this really the right thing for you? It's not a surprise when you finally say, I really think that you probably need to start looking for something else. And that's the way I like to do it, right? It's everyone their runway to.
No, I love that. I'm always curious because I believe it in practice and I know why it works, but then I also come from this high performance sports background where the person either gets in front of the goal and they score, and they do that more often than everyone else, or they don't. And in business, we're like, well, maybe one day they can learn to score. In sports, you just look at them and you're like, you got it or you don't. And everybody at the highest level works equally hard. And there's some people that work less hard because they're more gifted, but the best of the best are the most gifted and the hardest working. Yet in business, we somehow lower our standards sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always trying to find that balance of how much is a performance culture and how much is a community culture, and then how do you drive performance through both? Because I think it's a delicate balancing act that I think every C-level executive is playing, is high performance team with high retention culture. And it's like the two are fighting each other sometimes, right? And so, I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, and there's definitely been times where your gut tells you, right? I don't think this is the right fit. And I always make sure I give people enough time to progress. And probably sometimes I've waited a little too long. But I'd rather lean towards that than lean towards you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Absolutely, I feel very strongly about this. Yeah,
and I've done the baby bathwater thing early in my career, and I've moved more to the other direction later in my career. And I think there's still this middle ground that I'm still trying to figure out how do you find it? It's a very difficult, I think, situation, number one. But I want to go to another thing here that I'm curious about. I would call Mediafly a challenger brand, right? Mm-hmm. You have a great product and you're challenging for more market share. Now, what I've learned is market share growth usually comes from positioning and resources. And people want to beat the big guys, but they don't spend as much as the big guys, so they can't ever beat the big guys. So what's your take on this weird little thing of people saying they want to win but don't have the money to win?
My take is I need more budget. Question, our CEO, are you listening? I'm going to send you the podcast when it's over.
But you know what I'm saying? Because it's this weird thing. Because I'm the type of leader, if I give you a new goal, I always give you new budget because I don't know how you hit new goal without new budget. And so, but I found that my clients don't do that, right? So we have over 100 clients, mid-market, enterprise SaaS. Almost all of them have at least 20 million in funding, over 100 employees. These are the big and the baddies of the game. And they all want to grow, yet all of them have these Stone Age budgetary approaches to finance that don't allow for them funding. Let's say you had a client and they want to hit an LTV CAC greater than 3. And you're running your LTV CAC at 6, yet at the end of the quarter, you somehow still can't get budget. So what's the point of the LTV CAC ratio? So how do you change that as CMO in a challenger brand so you're not always a challenger brand? Because is there any way to not be a challenger brand if you don't start investing more?
So, there's two things that come to mind here. One is you can't outspend them. You have to outsmart them. I know it's a buzzword, but it also makes sense, right? So there's some things that we know we're doing better than the competition. Yeah. Our digital marketing strategy, for example, has worked really well for us. And we can see now that they're copying us, right? Yeah. So what's the expression? Flattery. When you do
imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Exactly. So there's some of that. The other thing is brand, and to me that's the biggest challenge, right? So, and because brand is the long game.
It's the quote unquote waste of money that the board never approves.
So, but it's very important. At some point, you can outsmart, but you have to invest in the brand, right? Because you need to put your name out there, and you need to create experiences that are going to get noticed. And you may not be able to be always where your competitors are, but you should try to do more of that, if possible. So I think I know the brand is always a challenging conversation in terms of funding.
I love that. No,
and I think that happens once in some ways, you need to get permission for that, right? You need to, again, you bring demand, you show pipe, and then you can say, okay, now if we really need to continue to grow.
You don't really want to do this darn thing. We got to start throwing some CPM money at this and start running some connected TV, some video ads, creating emotion. Now it is sour and SaaS, Isabelle.
Oh, that's right. All right, I'm gonna start with toxic waste because that's.
Yeah, you can just stay on those. You don't have to do the warheads. They're hell. I'm doing warhead because I'm out of toxic waste, and I like I'm right there with you. All right.
And this one is completely stuck, so you're gonna have to bear with me here for a second. Wow.
I know. I pre-opened them because that happens.
I thought I had pre-opened it, but okay.
Oh God.
These aren't bad. So just so everybody knows is this.
Yeah, I've got warheads.
Actually, no, the warheads are atrocious.
So you have a tagline called "Evolve Selling."
Mm-hmm.
Yet you've not turned it into a category.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you said you want to outsmart the competition. And I'm right there with you. But I think a lot of people do create categories as startups because then they don't have to compete on the same set of features, right? And you guys have a great section called Close in your website that talks about value selling and things like that. As a marketer, do you think this whole category creation thing is a bunch of hoopla? Do you think it's valuable? Where do you sit? Because obviously category creation requires a great amount of awareness. And if you're saying you don't necessarily have enough for brand, it's hard to do category creation, right? So where do you stand on this category creation concept?
Do you want the politically correct answer or the?
No, I want the real answer. Give me the sour and sassy.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm skeptical. I mean, to me, it's a case of with all due respect to folks who have been writing about category creation, and I have learned a lot from your books, but I think marketing folks, we have a tendency to use new words for all concepts to sound like we're coming up with something new. I mean, to me, it's all about positioning, right?
I was having a conversation with my wife last night, and I was talking about therapies because it seems like there's adventure therapy, water therapy, horseback riding therapy. I said, oh my gosh, the therapists are just like marketers. They come up with their own category so they can own it, and then they can market it as the leader in it. And they become the leader of horseback therapy. And I'm not saying horseback therapy has no value, but it's actually the same concept actually of creating a new therapy is like creating a new category to a certain extent, right? Like you have a unique approach to doing something. Mm-hmm. You don't want to call it the same thing as everyone else because it's frankly different, but it might be able to be applied, the same learnings of that to other things.
Right. But the thing too is, and that's where we've landed ultimately is, you want to be able to talk about yourself in a way that makes sense for your target audience. And so that you can really be in their consideration set too. And the reality is people think of our category as sales enablement and content management. It's not sexy. It's not as sexy as Evolve Selling. It's not as sexy as content engagement. I recognize all of this.
Yeah.
But this is the language they use. And when they're searching for those things, we want to come up.
And
right?
I was the king of this, right? So here's my feedback. I wrote the playbook on Share a SERP. So I've been doing this for a long time. I grew Directive initially by this. Essentially, if you search SEO agency, I was ranking in the top 3 organically. I was on every list in the top 3. And what happened, and where I couldn't do it anymore, because I was the biggest proponent of what you're saying. And it made a lot of money. I did great. Was when I raised my rates. Because what I found was I was beholden to the price point associated with my category. In other words, essentially, if like your pricing and your AOV is oftentimes channel dependent. In other words, when I advertised on clutch.co, which is like your version of G2 or Capterra, they would anchor my price to the two other quotes they got. So let's say I'm number 3 on Capterra and they talk to me and the other 2 players. The other 2 players charge 5K, but I have a 7K minimum. I wasn't able to monetize that channel anymore due to my higher price point because I was commoditized. They didn't understand what made me, they knew why I was better, but I have this saying that people don't pay more for better, they only pay more for different. And so I got stuck. Do you feel like that applies in software or is it different?
I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. And
your positioning, right?
And your positioning and knowing your audience and whether you're up market, whether you're mid market, and all of those things. I don't think there's one universal answer. But I think there's something to perception, right? That goes with the price point. Perception of leadership and so on.
No, 100%. Like I have this thing called perception is reality, right? I'm on the same line there. I guess you're totally right though, because like if I was a low average order value, high volume product, Capterra would kill for me. But if I'm a high average order value, ICP driven product, Capterra is going to suck for me in a lot of areas because the vast majority of searchers don't have 100+ seats, let's say, or whatever that ICP criteria is. ABM. ABM was this hot thing that I think we all got burned by to a certain extent. Like, did you do the terminus radius type thing where you like buy it and you get a ton of impressions, but then it's hard to fund it because it doesn't turn into revenue that well? Did you go through that phase? Or are you still figuring that out? Like, where do you land on ABM now?
Yeah, we've done a lot of things on ABM that have worked really, really well for us. So we work with 6 Sense.
Okay.
And it's taken us some time to get it off the ground, I'll be honest, and optimize and get better at it. But I would say ABM and the 6 Sense platform have been the crux of the alignment between marketing and sales, ultimately. Wow. And going up market and having the discussions around ICP and staying really focused on our ICP and doing what I call 360, right? So we're targeting through 6 Sense digitally. The SDRs are doing the outreach to the same accounts. We're creating bespoke events with those same prospects. So it's a complete, I call it ABM on steroids.
Yeah.
And the technology of ABM, so 6 Sense is one of the underpinnings of that. But it has.
Why does it work?
No,
Why does it work? Why does it?
Hugely successful for us.
Why does 6 Sense work though? I'll give you my experience. I was running the Terminus ads. Same TAM, right? 3,900 accounts. I got my outbound SDR team. I got my digital campaigns. I couldn't monetize Terminus like I could monetize my native stuff. In other words, when I just did a native upload of my account list to LinkedIn, it outperformed my Terminus because it was doing very much that GDN type stuff where I didn't have enough control and it was very much display driven. But then, as we all know, there's not a lot of engagement with that display. And so I struggle. How is 6 Sense different? Because I'm curious. I haven't ever used the product myself.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know enough about Terminus necessarily, but, the one big differentiator for 6 Sense is really the data, right? It's not just the ad platform.
Okay.
And so we get a lot of juice out of that.
More orchestration, you're saying.
Our entire outbound is mostly driven by intent, right? We know, we look at activity, we know what the accounts are searching for, we target the messaging based on the keywords, and so that's the thing. Now we are supplementing with Google Ads and so on and retargeting, and that works very well for us too, right? So I want to be clear, it's not just 6 Sense.
Yeah. That's interesting. So essentially using 6 Sense as like the foundation, the data orchestration, the alignment, the awareness, the tracking.
And then we get traffic, right? Because of the 6 Sense targeting, we can see the improved quality of the traffic we get on the website. And then we do lookalike from there too, and we do retargeting and eventually the inbound.
Wow. No, you guys have a really strong system then, and has that been a large driver of your growth? Would you say that ABM approach?
Completely, because we were up until frankly 2 quarters ago, so 6 months ago, we were, what I would call over-reliant on inbound. I mean, it was all, the pipe was all digitally driven, right?
So you'd miss your AOV quarter over quarter randomly because you couldn't control the quality of order size coming in through inbound because you couldn't target it. So you didn't really have control over average order value or pipeline revenue targets because it would be sporadic.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that was one of the big reasons why I pushed for the ICP conversations, right? And then through those conversations, we decided to go up market, which by the way, that's our legacy. That's where we came from in 2 main industries. And then we kind of strayed away from that and we went back to that. And my point was, if we want those logos, if we want enterprise and manufacturing and CPG, these companies are not going to come through the website. That's not how they research us. I mean, that's not the motion, right? So the only way we're going to be successful is outbound. Like we're going to have to go find them. Let's
go get them. Yeah.
That's where we made an investment to build outbound because we didn't have an outbound machine. We didn't have SDRs. Like our BDRs were schedulers, right? Like for inbound, we did not have prospecting. And so now it's flipped. Now, I would say it's 60-40, right? It's 60% outbound, 40% inbound in terms of the pipeline sources. But before it was like 80-20.
Wow. And you did that in 6 months. That's really impressive, Isabelle.
Yeah, it's about 6 months. I mean, we've all grown some gray hairs, for sure. Yeah. And it's scary too, there's a psychology to it, which is, we knew that, right? So you're becoming really hyper-targeted and you're starting to get fewer inbounds and we're like, wait, should we go down market? Maybe we shouldn't by those SMBs. And then we have a discussion like, no, we need to stick to our guns. It's working. ASP is going up, velocity is going, all those things, right? And so you just have to watch the metrics and
and stay the course, right? Half of marketing is not pivoting. It's ironic.
It's scary, but it's
I love that. All right. We have another sour candy we got to do.
Oh, wow. This is one I hate. I really like Warheads. I think we're doing them in different order. I did the toxic waste first. Which one are you doing now?
I'm doing Warhead. I ran out of toxic waste.
Okay, this is really disgusting.
Yeah, Brian, you got to buy me more candy, bro.
This is really fun. You want me to talk while I'm eating?
Oh my God, that one's so bad. Okay, now you do storage-based pricing. I don't really ever see that, where you're delineating between 2 plans. Mm-hmm. You don't show the price. Mm-hmm. But the big differentiator at the top of your pricing scale is 1 gig or 1 terabyte versus 2 terabytes. Why? I'm just curious.
Well, now, frankly, you're taking me into territory where I don't have a huge influence.
Yeah. I was just curious if you knew.
That's legacy, and it's worked for us.
Yeah.
We're also now considering some self-serve options. Okay. And what's worked very well, too, which is also on the website, I don't know if you've seen it, is Jumpstart, what we call Jumpstart packages. So lower price point for limited users, and we get you up and running in 3 weeks, and it's risk-free. And so those have worked very well. And then we grow from there.
I love that. I think obviously the hard part of all those is if you have the outbound approach is you have to have a long enough LTV to fund the initial acquisition cost, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why the land and expand model can sometimes, I've always struggled with on when you're heavily reliant on paid ads or SDRs, because you don't have your LTV CAC model gets weird. How do you do that different in software to balance that? Because I'm curious, I would love to do that in my own business, but Directive runs off ads, really. We are an ad-driven agency, which is not, I think I might be the only one in the whole world. It's not normal. Nobody does it this way. So, for you all being so outbound driven now, is it hard to have a land and expand model? Out of just curiosity?
No, I mean, that's what we're looking to do. Okay. It's, I can't tell you if it's hard, because again, the outbound engine is relatively new.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have a large enough base size to say we've done it successfully, but I would say it's all the leading indicators are up, so it looks like it for us.
Yeah, no. The only reason I ask is because like I usually hear it's just like you do things different, which I like. Because I normally hear like we're all inbound, and that's why we do product-led growth and land and expand because we have such a low acquisition cost. And you're like, no, we went all outbound. We did do all that other stuff you're talking about, but we're also doing land and expand. And I'm like, okay, all right, I see you. I just like interesting to me.
And to be clear, I don't think it's, my team often hears me say this. I think diversity is great in life, but it's also great in business, right? So it shouldn't be all of one or all of the other. I don't want to end up in a place where we become over reliant on outbound. I think it should be a mix. There's always going to be, you're going to lean in towards one more than the other. That's fine. And because of what we do and what we offer and who we're going after, I think outbound will be the predominance. But we're not walking away from inbound, right? So we continue to do everything we're doing. We're just adding resources on outbound. I want to have a mix. I definitely, absolutely, it needs to be outbound and inbound as in digital and field.
How do you balance this new? I'm right there with you. I believe the same thing, but I get my butt kicked by it. So maybe you have it figured out. Like what I mean by that is like, I go all in on my ICP. I get really good with first party data. I build up my TAM. I'm crushing it. Mm-hmm. And then I go look at my organic, right? So I do this like channel level planning every, period of planning. And I'm like, it's hard to fund organic because the way you fund organic is with headcount. And then you have this really long payback period. And then it's hard to create content that acquires your ICP. You can promote the content to the ICP, but now you're kind of back to outbound. So inbound has become really content marketing enablement for your outbound. If that makes sense, like how do you keep investing in inbound while still narrowing your ICP? That's a hard question for me.
So how do we keep investing on inbound while focusing on our ICP?
Yeah, because it's hard, right? Because the more you drill down your ICP, the less they search it. What I mean by that is like there's 10,000 people that search SEO agency. Mm-hmm. There's 100 people who search SEO agency for SaaS. So you have two options. You try to rank for SEO agency and serve 5% of total queries, or you try to rank for SaaS SEO agency and serve 100% of queries, but you can't scale it because you're kind of stuck. Right.
I mean, there's always going to be some waste. I guess maybe that's the answer, right? So there's always going to be some waste on the inbound, and we're okay with that.
Yeah, because it says such a low acquisition cost. We're okay with it. I like where your head's at. Yeah, I'm just curious because it's like these are the little things I play in my head are like the hypotheses of channels and logic, and then trying to match them to my strategy. It gets difficult with this game that we're trying to do as marketers, which is inbound and outbound and the blended customer acquisition cost, right? Now, you're doing something really cool, and I want to hear how you did it because I don't know how to do this. You've integrated 3 different acquisitions at Mediafly. Mm-hmm. I can see it as a CEO, but I'd like to see it more from a CMO perspective because you're the one who CEO, we get to sit there, give a big speech. Everybody claps for us. We seem like visionary.
Sign the paper.
You all have to do it, right? So, I get to be like, wow, look at me. I'm brilliant. I just got EBITDA arbitrage. I use my capital wisely. The board's clapping for me. Everybody loves me. And then you got to pick up the pieces, right? So as the CMO picking up the pieces, it's so true. I know. Like, how do you integrate them? Like, what do you do? Like, what's that? Like, let's say, what's the 5 steps of integrating a company to your marketing post-acquisition?
Cool. I love the question because that's been a big part of my life, and I couldn't have said it better. I mean, I joke with Carson about this all the time. Like, if we do one more acquisition, you're going to kill me because so much falls on marketing. I mean, it falls on everybody ultimately, right? Product. Hello.
Yeah.
And I've learned some things from that for sure. Yeah. And I talk about that a lot, right? So the biggest learning is really, and I actually heard this from a former board member, and he said to me, you make the announcement, obviously you have to prep, and a lot of that falls on your shoulders, right? You need to understand the strategy, what are we doing, why are we acquiring this company, and then be able to translate it to the outside world. But then just because the announcement and the deal is made and the announcement is made doesn't mean you've actually merged. And it takes time to do that, and don't rush through it, right? Okay. So there's a process, right? And we go through the same process every time, and I'll skip a lot of the details, but there's work streams that I build, right? And so there's the content messaging work stream, which means that you need to do an audit of the content and merge the two websites and so on. And then there's an ops work stream, which is around tech stack, right? And their vendors, are they using agencies? Do we have agencies? There's a duplication, all those things. And then so, there's 3 or 4 work streams like that. I assign leaders to each of the work streams, and we have a plan, and we go from there to execute. But I would say really the biggest thing is the 3 big learnings, right? One is don't rush through it. In other words, don't rush to merge. Yeah. Just don't. There's no need for that, right? So they'll have their website for a while. We have ours. They'll have their tech stack for a while. It's all good, right? They'll have their brand. We'll have ours.
Merge too early and you don't monetize the acquisition, right? Because yeah.
That's the other thing. And actually, which leads me to my next point, which is check your own biases, right? And just because in many acquisitions, you might be the bigger company or the bigger brand, it doesn't mean you actually need to absorb the other brand completely. And to be honest, we made that mistake. We made it with our first acquisition at Linian, which is our value selling tools. In hindsight, and hindsight is always 2020. Yeah, we were the bigger brand, but what we underestimated was there were a very, very niche product and a very niche brand, and within that niche, there were a leader.
They were big and bad, and that's followed the market.
Right. When we turned off their brand and absorbed into ours, we lost a lot of the awareness. And well, we're very proud of ourselves because we actually did rush, despite the advice I received. Like in 3 months, we merged a lot of the components. And we're like, yeah, we're amazing. We're amazing. And then we're like, a year later, we're like, ugh. So that's number 2. Check your own biases, right? Just because you're incoming and you're absorbing them doesn't mean that you're bigger and you're better necessarily. So check all of that. And then the third learning that I feel very strongly about is what I call mind the people. And mind the people on both sides, because you're ultimately bringing 2 large groups of people together. And it's freaking scary. Yeah. First of all, it's completely disruptive. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Acquisitions are disruptive. There's no way to.
Anxiety's running high. Everybody thinks they're going to be fired. Exactly, nobody's sure.
Right? It's disruptive in many ways. It's disruptive because you have to do your regular job. Plus now you have to, pull in another company, but psychologically it's disruptive because the people coming in are really scared, and the people that are already here are also scared because they don't know how that's going to impact their lives. And so the completely transparent communication, and this is very much coming from Carson, our CEO, right? Like we talk about the acquisition way before it happens, even, which I know is not necessarily best practice. Yeah. We don't hide anything, and then regular check-ins, back to those 101s, and then they become weekly with everybody on my. I'm going to speak for my team, but the folks that are not going to be joining my team too. How are you doing? Let me talk to you about how I'm thinking about your role. What do you want to be doing? Where do you see your career going? Like that exchange is the most important thing. Forget about everything I said before. Don't rush, sugar bite, all those things. If you only do one thing, is mind the people. And I remind my team that's already here that whatever trepidation you have, empathy, right? The other side has it 20 times more than we do.
Yeah, 100%.
So I know I'm getting very passionate about this, but it's for me, it's huge.
I love it, Isabelle. This has been amazing. I want to end on one last question. We're out of time. How many hours a week do you work? I want to help people who, I think there's this perception in young people that they need work-life balance, but they also want to be super successful. Out of curiosity, how many hours do you work?
It varies. I mean, honestly, it varies. I don't know. There's probably weeks where I work, I don't know what the math is, like 70 hours a week. Like I'll work late on weekdays and then Sunday will be a work day. But there's weeks where it doesn't happen, and I'm more towards the weeks that it doesn't happen. And I feel like I've always had mostly work-life balance, primarily because I have a professional hobby, which is dance. I've danced all my life, also teach dance. And I think the way you get to work-life balance is always by having something you love doing outside of work. When you have that, you will stop working.
I love that.
That's been my guiding principle.
I want to ask that, though, because you're a CMO, and a lot of people want to be a CMO, and they think they can get there by working their 40 hours and hanging out with all their friends all day. And I think they forget that it's a competition, and that anyone in the world can decide to be a CMO, actually, if they're smart enough and work hard enough. And so you got to outwork everybody too. So I love that answer. It was very fun chatting with you, Isabelle. Thank you so much for being on the show. And if anyone wants to follow along with your journey, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn, definitely LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, follow Isabelle on LinkedIn, everybody. And thanks for being on the show. That's Sour and SaaS. Bye, everybody.